So, we just heard the autumn budget from the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, and this morning she emerged from Downing Street holding the traditional red box containing the budget and looking all proud, but in reality, it might as well have been the nuclear suitcase, waiting for Rachel Reeves to input the launch codes and simply detonate the British economy just to keep the welfare state going for a little bit longer. And yes, taxes have gone up by £26 billion, in fact. And this is in spite of Rachel Reeves saying just a year ago, after her last round of tax raises to the tune of £40 billion, that she wasn't going to come back for more.
But this is it. This is the first budget of this Parliament, and we had to reset. We had to wipe the slate clean. We had to bring out into the open all of the previous government spending commitments.
Because a lot of people are saying you're going to do the same next year and the year after.
No,
and you're
absolutely
saying
not. No, we have now set the public spending envelope for this Parliament. We don't need to come back and ask for more. We've now set that. We're going to do a zero-based review to make sure we get value for money for every pound that taxpayers' money spent.
Okay, so firstly, which taxes are going up? Well, the big one is income tax. Income tax thresholds have been frozen until 2029, which pushes more workers into those higher rates of tax and means that the government will collect more tax revenue from working people. And this is precisely what the Labour government promised they would not do in their manifesto. So they have broken their manifesto pledge. And they know that they've done this because after the last budget, Rachel Reeves said that the reason she hadn't frozen income tax thresholds was because that would breach their manifesto pledge. But they've done it anyway, so congratulations Labour. Apparently this is going to raise £8 billion on the back of hard-working Brits. Now that wasn't the only tax on working people, because the government has just decided that you need to pay national insurance contributions when you're paying into your private pension. And to me, this is a real slap in the face of workers, because people my age know that the state pension as it currently exists will not exist by the time that we retire. We know that it's not going to be there for us, at least not in its current form. So if you're sensible, you're probably trying to stash money away into a private pension so that you can look after yourself in retirement. But the government has just said, no, we need national insurance contributions off you. And why do they need that? Well, they need that so they can maintain the triple lock on current pensions. And this is just completely indefensible. Look, I'm not a pensioner basher on this channel, but to ask people who are currently working to sacrifice their own pensions in the future to pay for pensions now, to pay for the triple lock to be maintained on pensions now, is just wrong. I don't see it any other way. I think that's completely absurd. It sends a really horrible message in this country that, you know, trying to save for the future and prepare for your own retirement is something that the government's not going to encourage anymore. But we all know that the state pension isn't going to exist by the time we get there. So we're just getting double shafted. And that's just ludicrous, right? Look, I know I've probably got a lot of pensioners who watch my channel, but that's just cruel and unfair. That's not right. Now, there are some other taxes too, of course. There's a tax on electric vehicles, which in itself is kind of bizarre because they spent so long trying to convince people to move to electric vehicles because it's cheaper, and now they're just going to ramp up the taxes. Anyway, whatever. There's also some changes to capital gains tax, changes to the rules around ISAs, and some very bizarre niche changes around gambling taxes, which I'm not even going to try to understand. But the budget itself can be summed up quite simply. If you are a worker or a saver, this is going to hurt. And if you are not a worker or a saver, but you are instead dependent on the state, then you're going to benefit, or at the very least be protected by this. And so you can understand why a lot of working people are pretty unhappy by what Rachel Reeves has announced today. Now, when I talk about people claiming welfare, that's actually a really broad range of people, because it includes pensioners whose state pension is going to rise by 4.8% next year, but it also includes people claiming universal credit. They're going to receive an additional 6.2% next year, which, for those of you who are aware of what the inflation rate is, will realise that's actually above inflation. And in fact, people claiming universal credit are going to see an above inflation rise to the amount that they receive every year for the next 5 years, which again is just a kick in the teeth of working people who are paying for all of this. Look, this can't last forever. We've got more people claiming welfare than ever before, and we're trying to pay them more than we used to. Surely I'm not the only one who can see that this house of cards is going to come tumbling down. This is deeply fiscally irresponsible, and it simply won't last. There was another announcement on welfare spending which I found particularly interesting, because Labour have just lifted the cap on child benefits. Until today, you could only claim child benefit for 2 children, but Labour have just removed that cap, so if you've got 3 or 4 or 5 children, you can now claim child benefit for all of them. And I'll say this, I do understand that any nation needs people and it needs children, otherwise the nation itself will collapse. So you want to encourage people to have children. But here's the problem I have with this specific piece of spending. If you take a look at the different ethnic groups in our society, you'll notice across fertility rates and employment rates, there are some pretty big disparities. So this, to me, starts to look like a tax on white British people to pay for and subsidise not white British people who tend to have larger families. Look, that's just the reality, and I'm sure I'll get lots of accusations about that, but those are the brutal facts. And to me, you're kind of therefore making the white British people pay for their own demographic replacement, which is completely inexcusable. So no, I don't support this policy, and I would love to see it scrapped. I know that the Reform Party support this policy as well, by the way, and I just can't understand that at all. There is a salient difference, by the way, between the way that Reform wanted to do this and the way that Labour have done it. Reform said that they would only lift it for working parents. So if you are a working couple and you've got 3 children, then you can claim child benefit on the 3rd child. Well, not so with Labour. It doesn't matter if you're working or not. Okay, so if you're both unemployed parents, you can now just claim more in child benefits. It's just, again, another slap in the face of working people, isn't it? Look, obviously there is a lot more in the budget than I've covered here, and I simply don't have time to go through it all and then put a video out a couple of hours after Rachel Reeves has finished her speech. Other people will make much better and more in-depth videos about this in the coming days, I've got absolutely no doubt, and I personally will be watching their videos. But I just wanted to give you a flavour of what I understand from this budget. And, you know, I've said it a few times in this video already, but it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Working people and savers, especially working people who are trying to save for the future, they're just kind of getting shafted, which is ironic because this is the Labour Party, but not really. It's more of the sort of welfare party at this point. And those people who aren't working, either legitimately because they're just fully retired, some people are obviously disabled, I fully understand that. Some people, I'm going to be brutally honest, are just chances. We all know that that's true. I'm just not going to shy away from that point. Those people are protected. And yeah, I mean, the more I think about that, you know, Labour, the Labour Party, well, not really anymore, are they? You know, because they're extracting wealth from people who are working and giving it to people who are not. So that's not really a Labour Party as I would understand it. Labour in name, but not in practice. Anyway, I just wanted to get this video out. Like I said, hopefully it gives you some understanding of what Rachel Reeves has talked about. You know, it's shambolic. This can't continue forever. Eventually this will collapse. You can't just turn your state into a welfare state ad infinitum, right? You can have some elements of socialism. You can have, as long as the rest of the economy is good, you can have the NHS, right? But you can't just have the NHS plus infinite welfare plus this, plus this, plus this, plus this. You can't do it. People have to be incentivized to work, and clearly they aren't anymore. You can just look at that by looking at how many people are starting to go on welfare, and it's just surging. It's absolutely through the roof. Work no longer pays in this country, or at least people don't have the perception that work pays, and so they're not going into work. Big problem for any economy. Anyway, look, I've rambled for too long. There's definitely going to be better videos out there for you to try and learn about what's happened in the budget. But yeah, thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. Please do leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in a future video.